If we want to talk about immigration, we need to understand that this is not new. In fact, human beings have been migrating throughout their entire history. In the particular case of the United States, migrants have become an active component in its history. And this is because the United States became the promised land for many years and for many people throughout the world.
Hundreds of thousands of people from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras have tried to enter the United States in recent years, fleeing gang violence and crippling poverty. In 2016 alone, U.S. Border Patrol agents stopped more than 77,000 families and nearly 60,000 unaccompanied children from these three countries, which are considered among the most violent places in the world. Many Americans have responded with sympathy and compassion, but supporters of tougher immigration rules argue the U.S. can't just take in everyone having a hard time. Some even claim these immigrants are making up stories of hardship to game the system.
You know, I've always asked myself the question, why do they come? Especially when you see a mother with an infant, mother that's a pregnant late mom, and you wonder what makes somebody risk their life and go through so much to journey north if it isn't because they have a very difficult situation back home.
El 18 de octubre salí de Guatemala. ¿Quiere bajarse? Bájese. Lo que decía yo, lo que me alentaba a mí a seguir, decía yo, todo tiene una recompensa. No fue fácil. Había ratos que yo decía, ya no quiero seguir. Todo lo que caminamos, un frío, mi hijo congelado, porque se ponía al lado y yo decía, Dios mío, ¿qué hago? ¿Con qué lo tapo? ¿Con qué lo cubro? Debajo de la lluvia, lo que hicimos fue unos nylons, ahí lo metí a él para que no le fuera a pegar, y aún así se me enfermó bastante. Y con esa fiebre teníamos que decirle, por favor, cómprenos medicina, por favor, porque los niños malos, enfermos, pues tal vez no fue el mejor camino, pero la verdad es que yo le doy gracias a Dios que estamos hasta aquí con bien.
We have a situation, it's a dire situation right now because there is a huge amount of immigrant families making their way to the United States, escaping very serious situations in their home countries, and people are just fleeing from their countries because they want to survive.
The immigrant that is coming is a family, a very vulnerable family that more than likely comes from the rural areas in their country. They're not very exposed to the city and to how city operates. They don't understand very much how to navigate especially in a new country, a different country from theirs. They are pretty frightened and disoriented as to what to do and how to move forward.
We are here seeing moms, children, dads, babies coming in, and we saw the same thing this summer. And we're here to care for them and to tell the different story that's not being told in the media.
Señora, ¿de dónde viene?
De El Salvador,
¿Con cuántos niños viene?
con 3.
¿Y qué tan difícil es venir con 3 niños?
Bastante, le digo yo.
¿Cómo es la situación allá en El Salvador?
Que allí tenemos un problema. Nosotros vivimos en un caserío derivado del departamento de Aguachapán, San Francisco Menéndez, que no tenemos agua. Todo el tiempo anda uno buscando el agua para tomar.
¿Por qué decidió venirse para acá?
Supuestamente para un mejor, ¿verdad? Pero no sabe uno lo que le toca en el camino. Con mis niños hubieron como 2 días que no comimos. Y por eso cuesta. Caminamos en la noche bastante.
Sí.
Y nos tocó dormir en un potrero.
¿Y cómo le hace para dormir ahí con los 3 niños?
Ahí primero duermo uno, después a los otros.
¿Qué pensaba usted?
Me arrepentía. Me arrepentía de haberme venido.
Everybody comes from somewhere else. And the people that I've met this week all want the same thing that everybody watching this video wants. They want to be able to care for themselves and their children and be safe.
I see dads that are humble. I see dads that are so caring, that they're attentive to their children, that they're faithful, that they're humble, that they're soft-spoken, that they're scared. And we sit with these dads, they're respectful. Every single person that I've seen come through the Humanitarian Center has been either a mom or a dad.
Salimos el 15 de noviembre de Antarrita, Copán, Honduras,
¿Con quién vienes?
con mi hijo. No, pues sí, es un viaje muy duro. Uno pues cuando está en Honduras piensa que, o está en su país de uno, pues uno piensa que es un viaje que le viene muy bien. Pero conforme uno va caminando, va avanzando el camino, uno se va dando cuenta que es un camino muy duro, sufrido. Pues los guías que lo traen a uno, pues lo tratan quizás como un animal o quizás peor. Uno viene buscando, puede hacer daño a este país, porque viene buscando más que todo un empleo. Sí hay gente mala en todos los países, pero sí la mayoría, el 90% creo que es gente buena. Que la mayoría que emigramos de allá es por la pobreza, que los agobia allá. Pero sí también hay un 10% que tal vez se miran de allá por los delincuencia, que tal vez tienen líos con las leyes. Allí sí, pero es un poco. Más que todo, el 90% es de gente buena, que viene buscando un mejor futuro. Uno viene buscando, puede hacer daño a este país, porque viene buscando más que todo un empleo.
Immigration, sometimes it's considered a crime or a felony, which is not the case necessarily, depending on each country's laws. And this is basically because trespassing a border has been criminalized or has been seen as something unlawful. And the problem with regulating these fluxes of human beings crossing borders is what is making many people think that this is actually a crime or a felony. There is a need for an immigration reform in the United States currently. There's a need for immigration reforms probably all over the world.
In an ideal world, our country would definitely address the whole immigration reality at our border in two different tracks. One for criminals, one where we keep our country safe and protect us from anybody entering our country to hurt us. and those who are entering because they're seeking asylum, they're seeking protection and safety.
It's just a scare tactic. It's all part of the fear so that people who are racist or who borderline racist or even just judgmental people decide that, oh yeah, we don't want those people because they're going to hurt our economy or our kids or whatever story. It's all about fear.
I think that the only thing that has changed is the rhetoric, because Border Patrol has been doing their job for years of keeping folks out that might have criminal backgrounds. They know what to look for. But the children, the moms, the dads, the babies, the abuelos, those are not the criminals. And we know that when they come in through these borders. We know that. And that's the story that has to be told.
What we're currently witnessing on the immigration or the migration coming from Central America to the United States is a very interesting phenomenon because we're talking about an entire cycle. These migrations are happening in part as a result of the influence that the United States had in the policies and the politics in their own homelands. So we need to go back to the 70s and 80s to understand what's happening.
What often gets overlooked in this debate is how things in the Northern Triangle got so bad in the first place, and a key role the US has played in that history. The violent crime that haunts the region is a direct legacy of the bloody civil wars in Guatemala from 1960 to 1996, and El Salvador from 1979 to 1992. In both countries, military right-wing governments backed by the US battled leftist insurgent groups and enlisted ruthless paramilitary death squads. As many as 200,000 Guatemalans and 75,000 Salvadorans were killed during the conflicts. The wars left behind a traumatized region with unstable governments and thousands of young unemployed ex-soldiers with easy access to weapons. The conflicts forced a mass exodus of Guatemalans and Salvadorans, including roughly a quarter of El Salvador's entire population. Between 1980 and 2000, the Central American immigrant population in the US, mostly from the Northern Triangle, increased from about 350,000 people to more than 2 million. Many crossed the US-Mexico border without documentation. The largest population settled in the Los Angeles area.
Currently, Central America is facing a lot of changes. And this is a result of all the turmoils that they've been facing since the 70s, 80s, and 90s. There are many, many changes in the democratic processes. There are also changes on the diversity in these countries. And there's also changes on how the violence is affecting the communities there. This is the main reason why many migrants are actually trying to look for a better life in the United States. They're running away from the gangs that bring violence, they run away from the corruption from their governments, and they're also running away from the poverty of their economies that haven't been able to stabilize during the past few years.
I asked the mother once, why did you come? Look at you. You have a little girl who's barely 5 years old and you're pregnant yourself. Why would you risk your life and put yourself in that situation? And she says, she showed me her hand and her hand was all disfigured. And said, you know why my hand is disfigured? Because somebody came into my house, they struck at my little girl and they were gonna kill her. I put my hand to save her. That's why I didn't even have the money to go to the doctor to get it healed correctly. So it healed all disfigured. If I didn't come, I'm certain that my child or myself would be dead right now. And so I have to try to save my child, my family.
What we're seeing are moms that are coming with their children in their arms, holding them with a fear in their eyes, a confusion, a hope, a desperation, and most of all, this kindness, this humility that they're coming with with their little babies, their daughters, their children, with the hope that they can rescue their children from what they've been suffering from in their country and what they're fleeing from.
Okay, so it's cold clothes, 3. Where are you going? ¿Dónde va a ir?
Salí de Honduras el 10 de noviembre. Pues realmente salí huyendo de mi pareja actual porque él me maltrataba. Él me golpeó la cara, me dejó morado todo lo que fue mi ojo derecho y luego me ponía la pistola en la cabeza, me hacía disparos en los pies, a mi hijo le reventó la boca porque le dio con la mano, le reventó el labio, mi otro hijo menor pues le dañó su rodillita y así sucesivamente le ponía el arma también a mis hijos en la cabeza porque no son hijos de él, tengo 2 hijos, conmigo solo traigo el menor, pues según fue la carrera que pegamos de noche en la madrugada, no sé quién realmente tiene mi otro hijo, si lo tiene mi hermano, lo tiene mi hermana. No sé realmente y es algo muy, muy aterrador lo que he vivido y a raíz de eso, de la violencia la que estaba sufriendo, pues decidí agarrar para este país, pero al mismo tiempo pienso mucho en mi hijo que dejé en Honduras.
And these people want, I can't say it enough, they want the same thing that every human being wants, is to be safe.
The United States has been influencing the politics of Central America and many other countries. All of these confrontations brought, at the end of the day, a lot of chaos, a lot of poverty, and a lot of violence, which ended up resulting in migrations going to the United States. Part of a paradox also is that many Salvadorians that moved to the United States, and particularly to California, ended up building gangs, learning from the gang culture in the United States. And this is what we call now maras.
But life in LA's poorest neighborhoods in the 1980s wasn't easy. The newcomers were often targeted by established gangs, and some of the young men in these communities began to form their own gangs for protection. Among them was Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, a gang formed by Salvadoran teenagers who loved heavy metal. Another LA-based gang, the 18th Street Gang, or M18, had been started by young Mexican immigrants decades earlier, but grew quickly in the 80s as more young men from Central America joined its ranks. In the mid-1990s, strict new anti-gang laws in California, combined with tough new federal immigration measures, led to a huge spike in gang deportations. Many non-citizens sentenced to a year or more in prison, even for offenses like drunk driving and petty theft were deported. Between 2001 and 2010, the US deported more than 120,000 people convicted of crimes back to the Northern Triangle. Many were native English speakers who had arrived in the US as young children. In Central America, they had few ties other than their gang connections. Over the next decade, MS-13 and M18 spread rapidly across the Northern Triangle and became increasingly violent and powerful. Most efforts to reduce gang violence haven't worked. Local government corruption is common, and gangs often pay off politicians and the police. In many poorer communities, gangs pressure children and young men to join the ranks and sexually assault many young women. Extortion is also widespread, particularly affecting small businesses and the public transportation sector.
And we're not listening to the real issues of what they're fleeing from. We're not hearing the real story of what's happening. We're not helping them in their country to get support.
For decades, there's been a debate on how to stop gangs, how to stop violence, how to stop corruption, the main problems that are affecting Central America nowadays. And there is not an answer yet. In fact, what immigrants want is an answer and a solution to those problems, because once they get a solution to that, they might be able to stay at home and they don't have to migrate anymore. But until the governments stabilize their own countries, until the society also modifies all these patterns that have been affecting it for decades, there probably won't be a current or a right solution for this.
Yo vengo de Honduras. Solo soy yo y mi nena. Como te digo, lo que pasa es que cuando tú no estás al día pagando las rentas con las pandillas en Honduras, te matan. Mi papá sería que se había retrasado a pagar y mataron a mi papá, a las pandillas en Honduras. A los 5 años mataron a mi hermano y también me caían mensajes donde me decían que lo mismo que le había pasado a mi hermano, que de la misma muerte me iban a dar a mí. Y me mandaban fotografías de la niña y de mi mamá, que los iban a matar si yo no pagaba. Puse denuncias en mi país sobre lo que me estaba pasando, pero al parecer como que nunca me ayudaron, las autoridades en Honduras nunca estaban ahí. Yo le platico a personas que si mi papá estuviera vivo, en verdad no tuviera yo la necesidad de estar aquí. Creo que mi vida fuera muy diferente. Mi hermano tal vez no estuviera muerto, si nada estuviera pasado, tanto la vida de mi hermano como la mía, creo que fuera una vida de éxito, pues. Yo viviera bien, no tuviera necesidad de andar huyendo de mi país. El problema de mi país es que si llegan ayudas a mi país, son ayudas que tal vez solo escuchas por la TV, por la radio, que dicen llegaron tantas ayudas a Honduras, pero ¿dónde están las ayudas? O tantos países donaron tantos millones de dólares a Honduras, ¿dónde están esos millones? Si Honduras estuviera bien, no miráramos por televisión esas miles de personas en caravana. Esas personas no vienen por quererse venir, vienen huyendo, porque no hay nada en mi país. Estados Unidos, un país muy hermoso, pero lo es por personas migrantes como nosotros. Nosotros solamente venimos a poner nuestras manos en los trabajos, pero no venimos a robarle a nadie. Nosotros a este país lo que venimos es a dejar nuestras manos, a dejar sudor, porque lo que venimos buscando es un mejor futuro para nuestra familia.
So I was helping out, and I was just kind of like running from section to section, helping the families out, and I just felt someone touching my shoulder, and then I turned around and I saw a 2-year-old that was just completely covered in red marks. I didn't know if they were blisters or what it was, but she kept coughing and coughing. And I was just running around to see if there was someone from like a medical practitioner or a physician. But when I touched the 2-year-old, her temperature was really, really high. It does look like it might be something viral, so you need to take her to the hospital as soon as possible. I saw Mom, and Mom was she didn't know what to do. She was also feeling she wasn't in control of the situation.
Nunca me imaginé que ella se me iba a poner así de malita, pues a ponerse tan grave. Me preocupé mucho, me sentí muy triste al saber que había logrado llegar hasta aquí, pero que mi niña estaba muy mal. Uno a veces sueña con llegar aquí por un sueño, pero nunca se imaginan las consecuencias que puede tener. Espero que Dios me ayude y darle algo mejor a mi hija.
I don't know, it's just, this is a humanitarian crisis, and I'm hoping that at some point someone in power, whoever that might be, at the local or national level, could have an aha moment and realize that these are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, and that they need our help. And if they were here, if they walked through the spaces that we walked through, there's no way that they couldn't offer that. Like, there is no way that if you're a human being and you have a heart, a beating heart, that you wouldn't do something about this.
We are all responsible. We cannot say it is not my problem. It is we are one people, and we must be, as people of the human race, we must care for one another. And so we can help by showing interest and getting informed and understanding what is happening, and not just allowing ourselves to be fearful because somebody is telling me I must be afraid of them, they're criminals, but really truly come and see. Get involved, get to know the families that are here, who are not criminals, who are here, who are victims, and understand that, and then you will know what you need to do.
There probably won't be a current or a right solution for this. There's a need for every single part of a society to participate in this. We're talking about private companies, we're talking about the governments, we're also talking about the people itself and the way they can own their own culture, their own land, and understand that this is something that shouldn't happen. This kind of migration shouldn't happen. People should migrate because they want a more prosperous life and because they want to be happy, not because they're running away from the land that they actually like.
As of November 2019, just across the Rio Grande from Brownsville, Texas, more than 3,000 asylum seekers are awaiting their asylum hearing in deplorable and dangerous conditions in Matamoros, Mexico. In January 2019, the Trump administration implemented the Migrant Protection Protocols, also known as the Remain in Mexico policy. This policy forces asylum seekers arriving at ports of entry on the U.S. southern border to be returned to Mexico to wait for the duration of their U.S. immigration proceedings. This is the latest attempt to discourage asylum seekers from entering the United States. Migrants have waited up to 8 months for a court date. Under the new policy, of more than 59,000 applications, only 11 applications have been granted.